Hi, I'm JD Oliva. I'm joined by my friend Nathan Lueth. Nathan, tell me a little bit how you got started illustrating and writing in comics.
Oh man, I feel like my origin story is the same as a lot of folks, but I'll try to put a creative spin on it. I've been drawing and doodling just whatever since I was a little kid, and just for whatever reason, never grew out of it. I always loved drawing what I saw on TV, and what I saw on TV most often was sci-fi, fantasy, superhero type stuff, and it's just stuck with me my entire life. And I've been fortunate enough to have supportive parents who were like, when college time came around, they're like, "You're going to art school," and I was like, "Okay." And yeah, no, I've done well. I've made a modest career for myself, and here I am today, launching my own nonsense on Kickstarter and Patreon.
Tell me a little bit about your kind of creative journey as far as being a creator goes. Like, when did you start really trying to do this on a professional level? How did you get to that point? Like, and what kind of led you to doing your stuff pretty much exclusively on Kickstarter?
Right. Well, I got out of art college and decided I didn't want to deliver pizza anymore, and that I probably ought to do something with this illustration degree that I just spent a small fortune on. First step for me was caricatures in the Mall of America. I had a friend of a friend who was doing who was working there, so I had an in. So trained up there, learned how to use an airbrush, learned how to get a likeness for about a year or two, and then started doing it for myself at fairs and festivals, and used that as a kind of a revenue base to start building a freelance career off of. And I had story ideas for a long time, and this was back in the far-flung years of the early 2000s,
Hmm.
and web comics were kind of, you know, in their, maybe not infancy, but in their adolescence. Uh, and that was something that always wanted to do. So I started up a web comic with my then girlfriend, and we just kept doing it for 8 years, and kind of developed a following with it. And finally, we have since parted, but I have the license to keep going with it as I wish. And we've launched it on and I've started launching it on Kickstarter, and the fans that we've developed over the years have been have shown up for it, and that's been awesome, and has now allowed me to launch my new series, The Canon Evangel. So it's just been kind of a one step, two step, building on the last thing, kind of gradually building it up over the years sort of situation.
Tell me about the two stories. Tell me about the Canon Evangeline and Pure Blood, and what they're kind of about, and what makes them kind of unique in the market.
Absolutely. Impure Blood is a Victorian flavored fantasy epic. The story is about a young lady with a mysterious past who rescues a half human gladiator because she believes he holds the key to tracking down the last full blooded member of his ancient mystical people. It's a high fantasy adventure, but as I mentioned, it's set in a Victorian world, so you got that steampunk element there. And as I mentioned, it took 8 years of drawing a page a week, but it is a complete story. So not gonna pull a George R. R. Martin on you and like leave you hanging or anything like that. Uh, and yeah, it's been my baby, and also kind of my launching pad for doing everything that follows. So I've been super fortunate to have that ability. Um, and then the Canon Evangel just launched in May. It's a post-apocalyptic urban fantasy. So it's set 10 years after a magical reawakening has like turned the modern world on its head, and it follows a lone paladin as she tries to keep the peace, help people navigate the brave new world, and if possible, try to put the brakes on the apocalypse in progress.
That's really respectable. Like, drawing a page a week for 8 years to try to get a story done. Like, it's remarkable dedication to getting something accomplished. I think a lot of people like talking about, hey, I want to do this thing, but very few people find a way to make it happen. And I think that's kind of what leads guys like us to be independent creators. I'm sure, like me, you kind of wanted to grow up doing the big
Mhm,
superhero stuff. Like we're
mhm,
all like that. But I mean, now I think
right.
the world is just different, and like doing
Yeah.
stuff independently is, I think for me it's more creatively fulfilling. Do you still
Yes.
have those aspirations to maybe want to do something big too, or are you really kind of focusing on doing your own thing?
Well, that's an interesting thing. I was asked that question elsewhere recently. Like, if you could, if you could work for one of the big two or take over a big property or take over any kind of other franchise, what would you be doing with it? And it wasn't until somebody asked me that I'm like, I'd be doing this actually. If I could launch a series under a Marvel DC title, this is the Canon of Angela, the series that I would be launching, which it's not a superhero title, so I don't think that would necessarily fly. But yeah, that is actually the advantage, I think, of doing the indie road, is that you do get to tell the story that you want to tell. You're not playing with somebody else's toys.
Hmm.
Um, I have worked with uh not Marvel and DC, but other franchise people. And I've worked on projects that are somebody's baby, and they have a lot of opinions about how it needs to be drawn. And from what I've heard from, so this is hearsay, but what I've heard from people who do, contract with the big two, it sounds like kind of like that, like there are all these rules that you have to follow in order to write a Spider-Man story, or there's all these rules you have to follow if you're gonna draw a Batman title. So yeah, I think this is kind of a golden age for comics, quite frankly, because it gives all the creators the ability to tell the story that they want to tell and in their way, which is not to say you shouldn't get an editor, but I'm honestly, my future hat prediction is that this is how the movie industry is going to be going in a couple of decades, where you're going to have a couple everybody's going to be launching their own movie, everybody's going to be their own indie studio, and you're going to have all these little collaboratives. And I mean, I'm sure the big guys will still be around and stuff, but platforms for indie movie makers, uh I'm going to bet we're going to start seeing loads of those start to crop up within the next decade or so.
I think you're right. I've talked to a couple people who are launching Indiegogo and Kickstarter campaigns to create movies.
Mhm.
I was a couple years ago, I jumped into prose, doing prose Kickstarter work, and got a lot of like flack for it. We're like, oh,
Right.
you can't be doing this on Kickstarter. And
What?
two years later, guys like Brandon Sanderson making $37 million doing
Yeah,
it.
right.
And well, now all
Right.
of a sudden it's so much more acceptable to do Kickstarters. So I think it's a matter of time before, like you're right, before you start seeing the indie creators really
Yeah.
taking over this sphere and doing their own thing, which is awesome.
Oh yeah, I guarantee it. Sanderson just broke the mold.
Oh, for sure.
I'd say my other prediction is you're going to see a lot of more big name authors cross that threshold and start launching their own Kickstarters. So you heard it here first, people. Watch out for the Dean Koontz Kickstarter.
Oh, I think it's going to happen. I mean, like I said, Brandon Sanderson's already done it. They've already
Oh
heard
yeah.
rumblings of other people
Oh,
thinking
absolutely.
about trying it. And I think that I think that's a great opportunity, because the more I know, like early on, people who like defending the medium or defending the platform, like, oh, we need to keep this small. And I
Oh
disagree, because you get these big guys in there, they bring their fan base, and then this is what makes Kickstarter so cool: is they tell people, hey, you back this, perhaps you'll like that,
right,
you know,
right.
and
No.
it gives guys like us a chance to really get our work out there, who don't have like the pedigree of maybe coming from a bigger studio or bigger, publishing house.
Yeah.
So I think this is real exciting. Tell me a little bit about your creative process, how something goes from like the idea to on the page. Like what is it we mean for you?
So, as a illustrator first and a writer second, I'm kind of in an interesting position in which I can see the page on my head and kind of have an idea of how I want the dialogue to go. So I have to write that down if I want to get it edited or run it past beta readers or anything like that. I have to write it down first, and then run it past people, and then go back and then sketch it out. So to and I'm used to just being handed a script and going with it and then taking it to art. But it's a little frustrating because it feels like there's an extra step in there, but I think it's healthy, a healthy extra step, because it allows me to see, okay, what is actually going to work on this page ahead of time, and how much dialogue can I actually fit on there. And that's kind of been the other funny thing writing for myself is I'm doing the thing that so many other writers, I'm doing to myself the thing that so many other writers have done to me, which is uh, uh, um, trying to cram way too much on every page. I have a new understanding and a new sympathy for writers who are working with artists in that regard. So yeah, so I'll try to get out of my head what's onto my Google Docs script, run through it. I'll run it past some just stream of consciousness that I'll run it past some other trusted readers, see what they think of it, see what works, see what doesn't. Then I'll do a pretty rough storyboard slash sketch, because again, when I'm just doing it for myself, I don't need to worry about clean lines for an inker. And so then I will take that very loose sketch and ink straight over it and make the refined lines. I have a flattist, an awesome flattist, Samantha Summers, who I will then kick that to, and she'll kick it back to me, and then I'll add the finishing touches, shadows, highlights, special effects, textures, etc., and so forth. So, and then yeah, and then because we live in the age we live in, I'll chop up all the panels so I can post it on social media and or mobile devices, and then Bob's your uncle, and then it's on to the next one, because that's the thing about having an ongoing series, is there's always the next page next week.
So I'm curious, like, is from a guy who does pretty much the writing and the art, how often does what you see in your head wind up exactly as it is on the page, or does things change between the process? Because I know when I'm writing a book, I see something clear in my head, and then by the time the fingers hit the keys, I'm like, well, that didn't come out exactly the way I thought.
Right, almost never. So yeah, and that's just the way of it. The I mean, it's good to have an idea, and pre-visualization is great because you can always speed it up a little bit, and that will speed up the process a bit. But you also what is it? Reality and pragmatism always have to be the guiding star in terms of in terms of what you want. So if a composition or a panel composition or layout isn't working the way I want it to, or the word balloons aren't falling the way I need them in order to get the flow across the page right, then it's just like, well, I work digitally, so I can't really crumple anything up and toss it in the trash. But you usually have to work it to get it right, to get it into the and accept the fact that this may not be exactly what I wanted, but this is how this is as close to how I wanted as it can be and still work.
So when you're working with your editor, are
Mhm.
they more working with you on building a story and making sure the story flows, or are they or are they going through your art and being like, yes, no, as far as like panels and the story breakdowns? How do they work with you as being both the writer and the artist on the story?
I just give them the script.
Okay.
I don't really show them the pages or anything like that. I uh, I do kind of have a critical eye, and I do post stuff on my Patreon, so patrons can,
Okay.
events, look at that. So my core audience can give me feedback. Although anybody who I mean, don't get me wrong. I love audiences of all stripes, but the overwhelming majority of them are going to give you a, uh, yeah, that's great, or an, or make some kind of jokey comment about how something looks like something else, which is fine, which is great, but not necessarily constructive criticism. So for the writing, I am shopping that out a little bit and getting second opinions, but for the art I'm largely uh doing it myself, and that is also admittedly partly for my own sanity, because I see one, if I stop to fix every little thing that I saw that was wrong with the art, I'd be working on this for the next 3 years.
It'd
Like
never
I'd be
get
working
done.
on every page for 3 years like the Mona Lisa. So
Hmm.
um I guess short answer long. I guess I feel like my editorial eye is solid enough that I can spot most things, but I mean, that's no human being ever. So, largely I just kind of roll with it.
No, that's cool. That's interesting. I was wondering how that would work. You mentioned your Patreon. How did you get that going, and how does it work for you as a creator? Like, I find this super interesting when you see indie artists that are
Mhm.
functioning with the functioning Patreon. I'm very curious to know more about that.
uh, so I just launched it in May, had a member drive and treated it largely like it was a Kickstarter launch. So we had prizes, gave away bonuses for people that signed up, early bird specials, etc., and so forth. Had a art raffle drawing, and so far so good. I've had a pretty strong start. Yeah, but Patreon can always be a little bit more, but
Mhm.
I'm largely happy with how it went. Um, and the other nice thing about Patreon is it can, unlike Kickstarter, it can keep growing. There's
Right.
not like an end date. You can just keep on going. And I've even garnered another Patreon pal or two since the end of that. So, and largely I just treat it like they're my clients. I've done freelance illustration for all these years as well, and so as part of that, as part of the course, I just try to check in with my clients once a week and say, okay, you know, here's here's what I've accomplished this week on this project. Keeps them up on the timeline. They generally seem to appreciate it. And so that's kind of what I've been doing with the Patreon. Just, beginning of the day, every day. Oh, allegedly, my goal is to do it at the beginning of the day every day. Still getting into their rhythm a little bit, but just post. Okay, here's what I accomplished yesterday. Here's how things are going on the project. Here's this cool speed drawing video I did of the last page. And yeah, it's largely just keeping them abreast of progress and such, and throwing in a few other bonuses, like custom cartoons that I don't really put out to my mailing list or on social media.
That's fascinating. That is something I've never personally jumped into, but I'm always curious to hear how people in the creative world are able to make that a
Yeah.
thing. It's really, really pretty cool,
Well,
actually.
the great thing about it these days is there's lots of models for doing it. Every Disney Plus, Netflix,
That's true.
etc., are all subscription services. So I've kind of half joking, half seriously been saying this is Netflix. That I have my entire archive from my 17-year career as a freelance illustrator and comic book artist, but on an archive that patrons can access. So all you have to do is click on it, and yeah, you got for uh, for $6 a month, you can get like 34 comic books that I've drawn that you can read at your leisure. So
Are you tiered, or you just have the one, six, you just said $6 a month. Like, is that pretty much what your Patreon is, or do you have like different tiers, or how
I
do you
have
break that down?
I have 5 tiers.
Really?
Yep. $3 a month will get you early access to everything I do, so you can read the Canon Evangel, the latest page of the Canon Evangel before anybody else. You also get first dibs and discounts when I launch Kickstarters, and you get first say in all the polls that I run. $6 a month, as I mentioned, will get you access to my entire back catalog of comics from my 17-year career as a freelance illustrator. Plus, every time I finish a issue of Canon Evangel, I'll be throwing that up there as well. So it's constantly evolving and constantly, updating. $12 a month, and also, yeah, I'll post finished illustration projects that I'm working on. So like the commissions that I get, cover art that I do, et cetera, and so forth. I have to be a little careful of that because I do have to clear it with my clients and make sure that that's okay. Let them know that it's, a closed system. I'm not putting it out there for the whole world to see. This is, just for, a select group of people that are, paying me, or that are paying their membership. The $12 a month I think of as the work in progress tier. So that'll get you your speed drawing videos, your, glimpses at my sketches, glimpses at, how I do the pages. There's a bonus cartoon that I've been doing that I will do funny little mashups that, just the random brain farts that wander through my head. I'll do those up as a cartoon and then post that for the $12 a month tier. And then the $24 a month tier will get you access to tutorials that video tutorials that I do. So if you want to see how I do pencils, do inks, do colors, do some of the special effects that I do on my pages, the panels that I have at Comic Cons, and also I host a live draw, an art jam every other week. So yeah, bring your project. If you're an artist as well, ask me anything. For 2 hours every other Thursday, I am at the disposal of my audience.
That's fascinating, man. That's so cool how you're able to how you're able to really foster your hardcore audience and keep them engaged. I think that's commendable, and it's really forward thinking. Like I appreciate that. We
Yeah, I just wish I'd started it 10 years ago.
I mean,
But
I think we're all
right.
thinking the same thing. That's really neat. I mean, like I think a lot of people discount how much people are into you and willing to pay for you. I think we limit ourselves sometimes, being like, oh, that can't work for me, but you're showing it.
Yeah,
That's cool.
that self talk is weird, and I thank you for calling that out, because it is weird for me to think of it in those terms. I don't, we all, as you just mentioned, it's a self-talk issue. It's like, why on earth would anybody want to see this messy sketch that I just,
Yeah.
cropped out? It's a little bit weird. It's a little bit like saying, hey, this is a really nice house, can I see the blueprints to it?
Yeah.
Yeah. But we as creators forget that the vast majority of the human population doesn't do what we do, or at the very least has not developed it to the extent that we've developed it. So yeah, and I guess I of anybody should have known better from my years of caricaturing, because it's whenever I start to draw, whenever I'm in the chair, I will inevitably have looky-loos coming by and checking out over my shoulder and seeing what I'm doing, and seeing how the drawing is coming along and such. So yeah, I think it is important for we creators to keep that in mind, that this to non-artists, what we do is magic.
Yeah.
And yeah, and also people want to get to know us, on a little bit of a personal level. Boundaries are important, of course, but yeah, put yourself out there, which is hard for us sometimes, because yeah, we are largely a group of people that have gotten through life by shutting ourselves in a room and drawing. So
Very accurate. We're both part of the Urban Fantasy Facebook group. Tell me about the phrasing of urban fantasy and kind of what that means to you and your work.
Well, well, I've always had a special place in my heart for the what the mundane meeting the magical. So I've always loved the idea that magic is still real and out there, and that maybe that guy is secretly a troll who lives under a bridge, and maybe that maybe this other person over here is a some kind of fantasy creature. um and yeah, it's just the idea that these things haven't gone away, or that these elements that we used to think of as literal fact have never gone away, which I think is very true on an emotional and psychological level as well. We Don't get me wrong, I'm a science fan, absolutely. I think science should be our guiding star when it comes to forming policy and making decisions, but you can't discount the fact that people need magic and mystery in their life. That's a fundamental emotional and psychological need for so many people. And I think that's kind of what the root of urban fantasy is, that in the midst of all this this amazing and tech forgive me, magical technology that we have these days, that uh, old magic, what we used to think of as magic, can still exist. That there's a meta reality beyond what we can see, taste, touch, and etc.
That's fascinating, man. I like how you
And
break
I
that
think
down.
that, no, thank you very much.
So I think as we're wrapping up, tell me a little bit about when your next campaign gets going, how people can join your Patreon, what's coming up next for you creatively, like that you're going to be pushing.
Yes, sir. Let's see. If you want to join the Patreon, come check it out. I'm Nathan Lueth Illustration, Lueth Illustration on Patreon and all the social medias. In fact, I thank you for giving me a chance to lay out all of the tiers and all the stuff that you can get. NathanLuethIllustration.com is my webpage, and you can sign up for the mailing list there and get a free sampler platter, a poo-poo platter of comics I've drawn, if you will. At my webpage, NathanLuethIllustration.com. You can read the Canon Evangel at canonevangel.com, and the Kickstarter for the first issue is coming right up here. We're launching July 12th. And then beyond that, urban fantasy fans will be interested to know that I am launching a comics anthology book called Concrete Arcanum this autumn. So if you want to be notified when that launches, the best thing to do is to go to my website and sign up for the mailing list.
Give me a quick pitch of this anthology you're putting out this fall.
I get a very similar premise to the Canon Evangel, but the pitch to the contributing creators was that magic and monsters are out of the closet. It has become known to the mainstream world that magic is real, monsters are real, all the creatures that you thought were fairy tales are living amongst us. It is common knowledge now. So how is the world reacting to that? How are people coping with that, both on a personal level and on a societal level? And the stories that I've been getting in are just there's hilarious stuff, there's heartbreaking stuff, there is exciting action-packed stuff. I am so very excited to bring Concrete Arcanum to life. It's been a stressful joy to bring this about. So I cannot wait to put it on Kickstarter and see if this turkey flies.
That sounds awesome. I cannot wait to read that myself. I'm in for sure. Thanks for
Wonderful.
taking a couple minutes with me this morning, man. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you. I appreciate you.